This is going to be a quick setup guide for Flycast on the AYN Thor. So first things first, if you've not seen any of my other setup guides, then you must be a real big fan of the Dreamcast to choose this one first. However, you're going to need a couple of apps. You're going to need OBTAINIUM, which will allow us to download Flycast, the Dreamcast emulator. You're also going to need a specific emulation pack for OBTAINIUM, so it knows which apps that it needs to track. So I'll leave the links to those in the description. All you need to do is download the APK files and install them. So if we open up OBTAINIUM, and then once you've got that RJNY emulation pack, if you come over to import export, and then tap that import, and then just import the latest file you download. There is a full setup guide, which I'll also link if you want me to go into a little bit more detail. So once you've done that, you'll see we have our emulator list. So if I scroll down, we'll look for Flycast. This is our Dreamcast emulator. So we'll install that. Should only take a second. Okie dokie. Close that off, and then we should have it. There it is. I'll just bring it over to my main screen just for ease. So now we have Flycast. So we're going to open it up. So first, we're going to need to add our games list. So I've already got some games. They are copyrighted, so I can't tell you where to get them from. However, you've got access to the internet. They are out there, and they're not particularly difficult to find. So we'll add the game folder. So I keep all my games in a ROMs folder, and then inside that folder is specific folders. I use a front end called Emulation Station, or ESDE. That uses a very specific folder layout. So if you've seen my other videos, you've seen me talk about it in more depth. If you haven't, then all you need to know is this. If you're only going to use Flycast, it doesn't matter where you put the ROMs, just put them in a Dreamcast folder. But if you're using this layout, which most front ends do, you're looking for Dreamcast. Nice and simple. So these are also CHD files, which is a compressed version of an ISO file. An ISO file is a copy of the original disc, and then all this does is they've been run through a converter, and it just strips out a lot of the garbage and junk data and reduces the file size significantly. I did do a video on shrinking ROM files as well. So we'll use that folder for our games. So there we go. It's grabbed the artwork automatically. And then for our settings, we need to set up a few paths. So for language, English obviously. Broadcast will leave as NTSC, because in the PAL region, the refresh rate was 50 Hz. So the games felt a tad slower. We'll leave the box art game list and fetch on automatically. You can enable retro achievements if you like. So all you need to do is tick that and then log in with your username and password. And you can enable hardcore mode as well. If you're not sure what hardcore mode is, basically, when you use hardcore mode, you're not allowed to use certain emulator features, for example, cheats or save states and load states, things like that. I think you can, some emulators, when you quit out, it will automatically create a save state. It will load that one for you, and that's okay, but you can't keep loading from directly within the emulator. So we also, we scroll down right to the bottom, we'll see there's these custom paths. So for our BIOS folders, this is essential. So not all these games are going to work without a BIOS. If you're not sure what a BIOS is, it's essentially a copy of the system's firmware that would have been on the original consoles. So we need those to basically either help the games run better or help them run at all. Flycast and some other emulators do come with a version of a BIOS in there. However, it's very basic and it doesn't work with everything. So again, you can easily find Dreamcast BIOS files online. So I'm going to add a path, and then inside my folder, I have this BIOS folder. In there, I've got my DC folder. So this is my BIOS folder. So we've got our DC boot bin and DC flash. That's our main Dreamcast. We've got the Naomi zip. That's for the Dreamcast Naomi. And there's also a few additional ones for some of the other Dreamcast plugins. And there's the arcade one, whose name escapes me right now. But that's all included in here. Again, easy enough to find. So we'll allow that. You can also add custom texture packs. I will be doing a video about texture packs across all emulators at some point. For the Thor, and for a lot of these handhelds, I've found that there hasn't really been a great use for a lot of texture packs outside of possibly some UI replacements or text upscaling. A lot of the emulators, particularly the standalone ones, come with upscalers using the GPU and the device itself. To me, that does a good enough job because when I did some testing, I found that there was not a noticeable difference to the textures. And for the effort to get the texture packs to load, it didn't seem worth it. So next we're going to map our controls. So we have the virtual gamepad here. So it's import A. So it's obviously our player one. We're going to go to edit layout. Oh, that's the touch one. So I'm just going to cancel out of that. Oh, so there we are. So the Odin controller we want, ignore that. So we don't want the virtual gamepad, we want the Odin controller. So we're going to map that. So I believe this should be... Oh, by default, it should be okay. However, it's always good for any of these emulators. So you can see there when I move the analog sticks that they are registering. So it is always a good thing just to check. Because I can see that the analogs are working. How about my A, B, X, Y? Yep, they're working. My C button is mapped to R1 and my Z button is mapped to L1. They seem to be working. Also got my left trigger and right trigger. They're working as well. Start, select. So this is... Flycast is quite good because it actually shows you the controls that are being pressed. A lot of emulators don't do this. So if you're setting up, if you've just got your Thor or your Odin or whichever device, the best thing to do is to manually map the controls yourself, just so you can be sure that you've set them up, because some of them, particularly those devices that have the Nintendo layout, when it tries to do a lot of the automated mapping, it can get a bit confused and mess it up. So, for example, you might find on the PlayStation emulators like DuckStation or Nether SX2 or ARM SX2, it will swap the buttons because it's looking for the Xbox layout. So your A on the bottom, your B on the right, your X on the left, and your Y on the top, like an old Xbox PC controller layout. So do double check. So you can also set up some custom keys if you want access to the menu, for example. So I'm just going to leave it as select. I think that's fine. So they all seem good. If you do need to map them, you can just press map and then press the button that you wish to use. So that's done. So now for video. So I'm going to switch this API to Vulkan. I always advise that if Vulkan is an option, use that. However, if you find that there are issues with Vulkan, just try OpenGL. A lot of these emulators as well, you can do a per game configuration. So if you find that some games work with OpenGL, you can open the menu from within the game, set that particular game to OpenGL, and it will save an individual config file. And then it will just use Vulkan as the default for anything that doesn't have a config file. So for the transparent sorting, I'm not 100% sure. There is these little information pieces that kind of tell you what they do and how it sorts the polygons. I've not really noticed a great difference. You'll probably notice a difference on a lower powered device, but for the Thor, it's a bit of a beast. So for our internal resolution, I'm going to set it. You want to set it to as close to the resolution of your device as possible. So I don't have a native 1080p one. So I'm just going to go for the closest thing, which is our 1280 by 960. So we'll go for a 2x scaling. You can enable integer scaling as well. I'm going to leave that off for now, and then because a lot of this will be an initial setup guide. So you might find that once you've got the games running, you might want to tweak how they look a little bit. Integer scaling tends to affect more 2D than 3D textures. We'll leave linear interpolation on, we'll leave VSync on. If you're using texture packs, if you kind of know what you're doing with texture packs, you do need to make sure you actually enable them, otherwise they won't load. So you can load the custom textures, and if you've got a powerful enough device, you can preload the custom textures. So what that will do is it will kind of stop the stuttering that you can get sometimes as it's loading those new textures in. It saves them in your device cache. So it gives you a slightly slower startup, but your overall game experience will be a little bit smoother. Aspect ratio, you can leave it native if you like, or you can enable widescreen. We'll see what widescreen looks like first. And then if you use widescreen game cheats, so these, they're not cheats in the same sense that Retro Achievements doesn't allow. Basically, it kind of hacks the memory value to force 16 by 9. So we'll see how that looks. Some of them, it can look, make the characters look a bit chubby, whereas we want them looking more Ozempic. So we'll see how that looks. For automatic frame skipping, I leave this off to start. What that is sometimes if it has like a little bit of lag, it will kind of skip the frame and make the game feel smoother. Again, for a device like the Thor, I don't think it's really necessary. It is a bit of a beast. Most of the, yeah, we'll just leave all these as default, for especially things like the texture filtering. Again, a lot of that affects a lot of the polygons and the kind of smoothing on the edges. So I'd say leave this as default and then look at per game configs if something doesn't look too right. Audio, you can enable the DSP audio. That was the little the Dreamcast sound processor, and then you can enable the VMU sounds if you want. I'm not going to do that. Network, I'll be doing a network video at some point about the network types once I've kind of got my head around them, and also I've made some friends who I can actually test them out with rather than trying to get my dog to help. So we'll leave those as they are for now. And then for the advanced, a lot of this you don't really need. If you're someone who wants to get into texture creation, you can dump the textures. So what that will do is as you play the game, anytime it loads a new texture into the memory, it can drop it into a folder. And then from that folder, you can get all those textures. You can Photoshop them. You can draw over them. You can use AI to upscale them. I know that's what a lot of people tend to do. There's all sorts of things you can play with. And this HLE BIOS, if you've got the BIOS files like I mentioned, you don't need this. It's basically a kind of open source BIOS. It's not got the best compatibility, but it's a middleman. You can also overclock the processor if you like. However, I don't think it's necessary unless the specific game requires it. But across the board, I don't think you need it. And that's about it. You can also enable custom drivers. So if you have the turnip drivers, if you're using the AYN Thor, then you can install those custom graphics drivers. So I'm going to do that now. So firstly, I'm going to go to my browser. And the driver I've been using is Mr. Purple's. So currently it's at version T26. So this has been, in my case, the most reliable turnip driver. If you're not sure what a turnip driver is, and you might have heard the phrase, I did do a whole video explaining what they are, but in a nutshell, it's just a customized graphics driver, which is more tailored towards emulation rather than the built-in one, which is a bit kind of more generalized. So all we need to do is grab that zip file. I've already downloaded it, but I'll download it again just for the sake of the video. So we'll go back to Flycast. I'm going to upload that custom driver, and it should be in my recent files. There it is. We'll tap that. We'll reset Vulkan to use the new driver. Yep. So I think, does this reboot the whole app, or? Oh no, it just reloads it. There we go. So that is basically it. So let's let's boot up some Jet Set Radio. So we need to get rid of this touchscreen. So if we swipe in from the left, or I think if you press the back button on the Thor, which is just underneath the right analog stick here, I need to sort out this AI capture thing. It's not the best. So you can go to settings again, and then we'll go back to our controls. So you can see at the top as well, just whilst I'm here, this make game config. So that's if you want to change the settings whilst you're here and customize that individual game config. So go to settings, and then we'll just turn the transparency right up. I don't know if there's a way to actually fully disable it. Definitely gone. So, or none will probably work best. So done. So because I've not set this as a per game config, it will just apply across the board. Okay, so let's resume. So we can see we have got widescreen. We get a little bit of audio. Hope the Jet Set Radio soundtrack isn't copyrighted. It will be, but yep, there we go. So I'll just mute that just in case anything gets flagged. But as you can see, the game runs fine. We'll just boot into a new game. Disclaimer, I'm not very good at Jet Set Radio, but you probably can be. So even with that widescreen, it looks great. A lot of the more popular games, you'll find they do. And you can see here, obviously, we've got the black lines at the top for the cutscene, which would have been our normal 4:3 ratio. But the widescreen hack has extended that, so we get a bit of a wider field of view, which does look a little bit odd. But hopefully, once the cutscene ends, we can see how it would look normally. I don't remember there being this much messing about with at the start of Jet Set Radio. There we go. So as you can see, widescreen looks normal. Does look a bit probably too wide. There is a super wide option as well. Again, one of the joys of emulation is kind of playing around and customizing. Although if you think this looks good and you're happy with it, by all means go right ahead. There is all sorts of settings with regards to. Oh, I messed up there because I was talking and I wasn't paying attention. So that was just a quick setup guide for Flycast for the AYN Thor. This will also work on the Odin or any other Android-based device. I'll leave any relevant links in the description. If you found this video helpful, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. We've also got a Discord if you're interested in emulation, you want to join the community. You can check out my other videos. I've got absolutely tons, particularly on the AYN Thor, but also I've started to add some for the Odin as well. So I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. Tell your friends, and I'll see you next time.